Subscribe, like, and comment now, because this isn't a street crime or prison riot. This is a story about how someone vanished in a place built to watch everyone. Inmate found dead at Rikers Island Jail after days locked in intake cell. The intake corridor at Rikers Island was never meant to be quiet. Doors slammed, radios chirped, voices echoed off concrete walls. But that morning, when officers unlocked the holding cell at the far end of the hall, the noise stopped. Inside, an inmate sat slumped against the wall, unmoving. The metal bench was cold. The air was stale. He had been there for days. At first, no one spoke. A supervisor checked the pulse. Another officer stepped back, eyes fixed on the floor. The cell log was pulled from the wall, flipped open with shaking hands. Names. Times. Scribbled initials. Then long gaps. Entire shifts missing. The kind of silence that follows wasn't confusion, it was dread. The inmate had arrived days earlier, processed late at night when the jail was stretched thin. Intake was supposed to be temporary, a holding point before medical screening and housing. Hours at most. But that system relied on people showing up, people checking boxes, people noticing when something went wrong. And here, something had gone very wrong. Detectives arrived while the body was still inside the cell. They photographed the bench, the locked door, the untouched food tray slid through the slot and never collected. The inmate's name was read aloud, then repeated, as if saying it twice might explain how it disappeared from the paperwork. Outside the corridor, staff whispered. Some said he'd asked for help. Others said no one remembered seeing him at all. Cameras were checked, then rechecked. One showed him being led into intake. Another showed officers walking past the cell. But there were hours, entire days, where the footage simply didn't exist. As news began to leak, administrators called it a tragic oversight. But investigators weren't convinced. This wasn't a single missed check. It was a chain of failures, layered so perfectly that no one noticed a human being fading away behind a locked door. Then came the discovery that changed the case. A detective noticed the intake log had been altered. Times overwritten. Initials added later. Someone hadn't just forgotten this inmate. Someone had gone back and tried to erase the mistake. And that raised a terrifying question. If this man hadn't died, would anyone have ever known he was there? By the time sunrise washed over Rikers Island, the jail was already in damage control mode. Supervisors barked orders, paperwork vanished, and officers who had worked intake the past week suddenly couldn't remember specific details. To the public, it would later be described as a tragic oversight. Inside the jail, everyone knew it was something far worse. Detective Marcus Hale arrived just after 6 a.m. He'd seen hardened crime scenes across New York City, but the intake corridor unsettled him. There were no broken locks, no signs of a struggle. Just a narrow cell, a concrete bench, and a body that had been left too long without help. That kind of death didn't scream violence. It whispered neglect. The victim was identified as Daniel Reyes, 32 years old, arrested on a low-level parole violation. No history of violence. No known enemies inside the jail. According to the intake log, Reyes was supposed to be processed within 12 hours. Instead, the timestamps told a disturbing story. Last confirmed check-in, 4 days ago. Hale noticed something else. The logbook had gaps. Entire lines were crossed out. A guard's initials appeared on shifts he never worked. Someone had gone back and rewritten history. As Hale questioned intake officers, their stories didn't line up. One claimed Reyes had been transferred. Another insisted medical staff had cleared him. A third swore the cell had been empty. Fear hung thick in the air, the kind that comes when people realize the truth could cost them their careers or their freedom. Meanwhile, an internal memo began circulating quietly. It warned staff not to speak to investigators without union representation. Surveillance footage from intake cameras was suddenly unavailable due to a technical malfunction that just happened to cover the exact days Reyes was held. Then came the autopsy results. The medical examiner found severe dehydration, signs of untreated withdrawal, and organ failure consistent with prolonged neglect. Reyes hadn't died quickly. He had deteriorated slowly, hour by hour, locked behind steel bars while the system forgot he existed. But the most chilling detail was a small notation buried in the report: scratch marks on the inside of the cell door. Faint. Overlapping. Desperate. Hale stared at the photographs longer than he should have. Those marks meant Reyes had been conscious long after he should have been checked. Long after someone could have helped. As pressure mounted from city officials, Hale received an anonymous tip on his phone. Just 6 words, no number attached. Check intake roster, night shift. When Hale pulled the roster, one name stood out. An officer who wasn't supposed to be there that week, yet appeared on every altered log entry connected to Reyes. And that's when Hale realized this wasn't just negligence. Someone had made sure Daniel Reyes stayed locked inside that cell. Detective Hale didn't confront the officer right away. In a place like Rikers Island, accusations traveled faster than truth, and whoever had manipulated the intake logs had already shown they knew how to erase tracks. Instead, Hale dug deeper, following the paper trail everyone else hoped would stay buried. The officer's name was Thomas Kearns. 20 years on the job. Clean record. No complaints serious enough to stick. But when Hale compared schedules, a pattern emerged. Kearns wasn't officially assigned to intake that week, yet his badge logged multiple late-night entries near the holding cells. Off the books. Unpaid. Voluntary. Hale requested Kearns's personnel file. Buried among commendations was a single, overlooked detail. 3 months earlier, Kearns had been disciplined for losing custody of an inmate during intake. The charge had been quietly dismissed after union intervention. The inmate's name made Hale pause. Daniel Reyes. The connection tightened the room. Reyes had filed a complaint claiming Kearns mocked him during intake, ignored his requests for medical help, and threatened to make him disappear in the system if he kept talking. The complaint never reached a supervisor. It was marked administrative delay and forgotten. Or intentionally buried. Hale brought Kearns in for questioning. The officer arrived calm, confident, almost offended by the summons. He insisted Reyes was processed like everyone else. He denied being in intake after hours. He blamed staffing shortages, broken cameras, and paperwork errors. Every answer sounded rehearsed. Then Hale slid the photos across the table. The scratch marks. The time stamps. The altered logs. For the first time, Kearns's expression shifted. Just slightly. Before Hale could press further, the interrogation was abruptly shut down. A union attorney entered the room. Kearns was escorted out, untouched. By the end of the day, Hale was informed the case had been reassigned to a special review board. That night, Hale's apartment was broken into. Nothing valuable was taken. No forced entry. Just a message left behind on his kitchen counter, written on a torn intake form. Drop it. The next morning, a jailhouse informant reached out through a burner phone. He claimed Reyes had been screaming for days. Officers heard him. Inmates heard him. One guard even joked about letting intake sort him out. But the informant added something else. On the 3rd night, the screams stopped. Not because Reyes was dead. Because someone told him no one was coming. Hale realized the truth was darker than a single corrupt officer. Silence had been enforced, not by violence, but by fear, routine, and a system designed to protect itself. As Hale prepared to go public, an urgent alert flashed on his phone. Officer Thomas Kearns had been found unresponsive in his car, parked near the East River. And suddenly, the key witness in Daniel Reyes's death was gone. By the time Detective Hale reached the scene near the East River, Officer Thomas Kearns was already being loaded into an ambulance. The official explanation came quickly. Medical emergency, no signs of foul play. But Hale noticed the small details others ignored. The car door was unlocked. The engine was cold. And sitting in the cup holder was Kearns's badge, placed upright, as if someone wanted it to be seen. Kearns died before he could speak. Within hours, the department labeled the incident unrelated to the Rikers case. The Special Review Board sealed his personnel records. Daniel Reyes's death was quietly reclassified as an administrative failure. No criminal charges. No arrests. Just another report filed, another name added to a growing list. But Hale wasn't done. He leaked everything. The altered intake logs. The missing wellness checks. The ignored complaint. The witness statement about Reyes's screams echoing through intake while guards walked past. The story broke within days, igniting public outrage. Protests erupted outside Rikers Island. Lawmakers demanded answers. Cameras finally turned toward the intake cells everyone pretended not to see. An internal investigation followed. Several supervisors were suspended. New policies were announced. Promises were made. The city called it reform. Hale called it damage control. Weeks later, Hale visited the intake area one last time. The cell where Daniel Reyes died had been cleaned, repainted, and fitted with a new camera. The floor looked spotless. Too spotless. As if erasing stains could erase memory. An officer on duty recognized Hale and quietly spoke. "You know this wasn't the first time," he said. "Just the first time it got out." That night, Hale received a final envelope. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of an intake roster from years earlier. A name circled in red. Another inmate. Another cell. Another death ruled natural. At the bottom, written in faded ink, were 4 words. Forgotten. Just like him. Daniel Reyes became a headline for a week, a statistic soon after. His family buried him without answers that felt complete. Rikers Island kept running. Intake cells kept filling. And somewhere inside the system, files continued to disappear. Hale understood then that the most dangerous thing about Rikers wasn't the gangs, the violence, or the overcrowding. It was how easy it was for a human being to vanish, without anyone noticing. And if this story shook you, remember, there are more just like it.